So, howdy everyone. Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of GRE Success Talks. Today, we're talking to Jeddy, who recently got into Master's in Financial Economics program at Columbia. So, congratulations to start.
Thank
He
you.
recently took the GRE and scored a 168 in quant and a 167 in verbal. And guess what? He did that all with just 2.5 weeks. I'm talking less than 18 days. And the fascinating part is memorizing 600 words in just 2 weeks. I don't know how it's possible. He unlocked a secret memory hack, something he just implanted the dictionary right into his frontal lobe. Well, we're going to find out how he did it today on our talk. So, viewers, let's give a warm welcome. Howdy, Jetty. Why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself before we jump into all these secrets?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I'm currently a fourth year at the University of Virginia. I'm studying financial econ with a minor in CS. I have like a little bit of work experience in corporate finance, but I think just to give you guys a little context of like the master's programs I was applying for, given that like I'm sure a lot of you guys are applying for MBAs, I was more interested in like the quantitative field of finance. So generally, my preparation was like very fine tuned towards quant, which is I think provides a little nuance into like I guess some of the advice I might give you. I think um, what I'll say about the quant section will be more valid because yeah, my verbal preparation was a little bit like shoddy, but it worked out. I'll explain that a little bit later, I guess.
Perfect. So I think just diving right into the discussion, setting the frame, I think you already sort of said your preparation style. You did it in 2.5 weeks. You split that preparation up into what you said was 45-minute slots, and you'd spend 4 slots on medium, hard sections of your quant and verbal, and the fifth was solely vocabulary.
Mhm.
So, what did you do in these first 4 slots? How did you sort of organize that to tackle it?
Yeah. So I really like I'm sure everyone who is like in school right now, like my mindset really was like you guys only have like a week to prepare for tests generally. So I really kind of adopted that mindset for the GRE. Um, yeah, so I guess like the most important part for like math from my perspective is just like practicing a lot and like really understanding like where your deficiencies are. So like the first 4 time slots, I like approximately like how I structured it was I was using GregMat for the most part.
Okay.
And I think like probably the first like few days I was just going through like the quant mountain just to like get a sense of like where or like what topics I was a little bit deficient in. But like the general structure of my time was like the first like 45-minute slot. I'd do like a medium and a hard test. It was like 15 questions per. I think like each test is like no more than like 21 minutes. And like for the mediums, I was just really trying to shoot for like close to 13, 14 out of 15. Whereas like the hards, like generally on the actual test is probably like 3 to 4 like actually hard like quant questions. So I think getting like a like 10 to 12 is like pretty sufficient for that. And then like those are like on the odd time slots, so like 1 and 3. But then like for the second and fourth time slot, I was really interested in like my deficiencies. And like one thing I'll like later go into for like how I actually like made the biggest point improvements, it was like really trying to like I guess like drop my ego and just like really understand that like even though I've like studied math in the past, like the GRE is kind of like different. Like the math on here is different, and I really just need to like understand what I'm doing wrong rather than like giving myself some like false notion that like I'm good at math because I think that mindset is probably the most harmful for your preparation.
Yeah. No, I can definitely agree. When you're going through the quant, I feel like a lot of us come from like a business or a finance background when we're considering a master's program. And so we're just like quant, that should be my easiest part. I gotta
Yeah,
focus on the verbal. And then like you do a quant practice and you're just like, wait, how did I only get 50% of those right?
right.
And I guess going through sort of those sections, you said you kind of went through practice tests to kind of see where your deficits at. Did this program sort of help highlight, sort of the topics that were sort of lacking, or was it sort of just you would go back through like an error log? How was that process?
Generally, so I was actually using GregMat for the most part, but like my brother was like I'm preparing at the same time as my brother is, and he had access to like Target Test Prep. So
Mhm.
generally, like for if I realized that there was like a specific topic that it wasn't just like a careless error, it was like genuinely like a fundamentals issue where
Mhm.
like I didn't understand what was being like tested. Like I think Target Test Prep provides like a very comprehensive like overview of like all the topics that are on the GRE, but like one like I guess like one qualm I had with it was that there's like information overload on that website. But I think
Mhm.
like if you use GregMat to like test yourself and then you like very uniquely identify where exactly you went wrong, then you can go like specifically to like whichever unit that like Target Test Prep has. So like for example like
Mhm.
permutations and like combinations, if that's where you struggle with like reading through the material before you go back into like taking more tests, that's like definitely a valuable thing to do. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think TTP, it definitely information overload. There's like so much content on the
Yeah.
site. Like I did the free trial when I was prepping, and I was just like, there's just way too much for me to even
Yeah.
think about for a week period. So it was just like, all right, what did I really need help with? And I like went through the very high level concepts of
Mhm.
like each of the sections first, and I just like read their little definitions of each, the breakdown of the sections, and I was like, okay, like I kind of get where the test is coming from, and then I'm like, all right, permutations, combinations is the first one because I know there's going to be like three of those on the test, and
Yeah,
be
that's
like
right.
at least be good enough to get those right, and then I
uh,
could be like work backwards from there.
mhm.
For yourself, um, what did you find as the hardest topics when it came to quant versus verbal, and then how did you tackle each of those?
Yeah. Okay, let's I guess I'll give a little context for like my preparation timeline.
Mhm.
Um, like I took the test December 30th, but that was my second test. My first test was right around Thanksgiving because this is just like I'm like still a student in college, so those were the times I was like home. So the Thanksgiving test, like I had initially planned to for that to be my final test. But like I realized that school was pretty challenging, so I didn't end up preparing for that test at all. So I kind of use it as a diagnostic. So I guess like that gives you like a little bit of a baseline of where I started. I got a 158 verbal and I think a 163 or 164 quant. Yeah, so I guess wait, could you remind me of the question? I think I went on a bit
Yeah,
of a
yeah.
tangent.
No, I think you gave a good, it's all good. I think you gave a good framework, which was basically you started off and you were thinking Thanksgiving's the time, here's what I'm going to do it. You got crunched. So you got this diagnostic. And so now you realize, hey, I need to improve these scores if I'm going to get to at least
Yeah,
like the median bar that you see for your program.
that's
How did you sort of tackle going from that diagnostic on Thanksgiving to then going to succeed on Christmas or before
right.
Christmas?
Yeah. So like I guess the quant section, I realized that my background was like good, but there was definitely a lot of improvements I could be making. And I think like once you guys get the fundamentals down for quant, like the most important part of the test is actually strategy. So
Mhm.
I'm sure like there's a ton of strategy videos out there. Like if you go on Greg Matt, like the strategy videos, there's like 40 minutes, like super worth watching. I guess like one of the key things that I took away from it was that like again like drop your ego, like be willing to skip questions. The
Mhm.
way he like the way Greg Matt like goes about like taking the quant section is like you skip all the quantitative comparisons. For like the easy section, you go straight into like the data analysis. Like if that's your strong suit, like generally those questions are pretty easy. If they're
Mhm.
not, I think like work on like reading comprehension. That's like another thing for like the verbal section. Reading comprehension is honestly more important than like actually knowing all the vocab.
Mhm.
But yeah, like for the quant section, going back to this, like just skip questions that you don't know, like highlight it, like give like a brief glance at like whatever concepts like actually being tested, and then like
Mhm.
once you go through all the like fill in the like what is it like numeric entry and like the multiple choice, like you can go back to the QCs, and then like once you've like seen the whole test, like like if you don't have time after you've seen the whole test, what it indicates is that your fundamentals are not good. But like if
Mhm.
your fundamentals are strong, if you genuinely believe your fundamentals are strong, like what'll bring you from like a low 160 to like a high 160 is gonna be strategy.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of my own preparations for doing the GMAT was get through the test. It's like you get the material, and then at some point, it's like, how much more can I crunch in of knowledge versus how
Yeah,
much more can I strategize to be efficient with my time? Because there's some questions
exactly.
where you could be on it for like 5 minutes and you're still like okay, am I certain that I'm at the final two answers? I could have made
Yeah.
any mistake along the way because there's like it's a combination of it being a tough question and then maybe that being like a sort of weaker fundamental of yours. So you're just like going back through and going back through and going back through, and you
Yeah,
don't know the
exactly.
shortcuts. So I think coming back to the strategy side, what was some things you implemented to help you be more efficient as a test taker?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I guess I'll go over like my strategies that I
Mhm,
had for the quantitative and the verbal section. I think the quantitative section I kind of like went over it. It's just like skip the QCs, go straight into like the easier questions because QCs like generally like I think like you have to you have to do a lot of testing for some of these like some of these questions like you could probably find a formula to solve it, but like for some of the harder ones like you're just gonna have to like plug in, and that's like kind of time consuming and you might not even get the right answer. But for like the multiple choice, there obviously there is a right answer.
mhm,
So yeah, like skip and then like do the QCs and then like go back. um for the verbal, uh, I realized that like again, like reading comprehension was my strong suit. So like
mhm,
I honestly had not very high expectations for my verbal. But I realized that like I might as well like I had the time, like 2 weeks of
mhm,
time to like, memorize some of the like vocab, like I mean the vocab mounds like what like 960 words or something around that.
mhm.
And like I kind of realized that rather than like having a very like what's it called? Like beginnery or what's a good word for that? Yeah, like
Like
shallow
rudimentary, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's been a while. But rather than having like a shallow understanding of like 900 words, it would have been better to just um like get a deep understanding of like as many words as I could.
Mhm,
So I guess for like my verbal strategy, it was like as far as preparation, it was mostly just like continuing to like read a lot, and then like getting a good understanding of as many vocab words as I could. And I just like wrote flashcards, like wrote sentences like with
mhm,
the words. But yeah, like as far as like the verbal testing goes, I follow like a similar strategy as quant where like I would skip the reading comprehension, and I would go straight into like the equivalences and sentence completions. And I think for like the first section after like I did these two, like just believe that you did them right, even if you
mhm,
didn't. Like you can go back to it after, but like after that I think I had like 11 to 13 minutes for the reading comprehension, and then like around 18 minutes for the reading comprehension on like the second section.
mhm,
And then as far as the reading comprehension, like the way I would approach it was I would just like write down, like I would read the questions first. There's like kind of contradictory like advice on this, but I would read the questions first. And then
mhm,
like as I'm reading through the actual text, for any text that's associated with two or more questions, I would like try to write summaries of what I was reading, which would help with the actual like answer generation.
mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I know a lot of systems or consultants or programs would often say like just read what you have because if you read the question, it'll get you to red herrings.
Mm.
So I guess what was your mindset that it was just easier for you to sort of concentrate? Like I know that's something I've had to talk with other people taking the test. It's like reading comprehension is weak for them because they'll get distracted when they're reading. They're like, oh, is this important or is this important?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think like I won't like when I say I read the questions, I don't read the multiple choice part of the question. I'd only read like the actual question itself because like as you mentioned, like when you're reading it's a lot of information and you kind of want to like digest what's important. And like
Mm-hmm,
for me, um yeah, I actually I didn't watch a lot of strategy videos for like the reading comprehension, so I kind of struggle to understand where these people are coming from.
mm-hmm,
But like for me, like when I'm reading, like in order to kind of like cut through some of the noise, like understanding what I'm looking for, like
mm-hmm,
was pretty important because I could kind of formulate my own opinions. And like of course if like your reading comprehension skills are kind of weaker and you formulate wrong opinions, I can see how that's misleading. But
mm-hmm.
like for me, it was like once I had formulated my opinions like about what I was reading, I like kind of cross reference with some of the answer choices, and like it worked out for me. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple strategies to tackle the test, and so depending
exactly.
on how you are as a test taker, different strategies work out well. I guess when it comes to your vocab tech, you said like you made flashcards, you implemented them into sentences. Was there other strategies or like what's a specific word that stood out to you in your mind that you either struggle with or it's just stuck in there now from your studying?
Oh man, I think I might have forgotten everything.
He's just like, I just dumped it all out. He's just like, it was 2.5 weeks
Yeah,
and then I flushed it.
it was like super short-term memory.
Yeah,
Maybe like sagacious.
sagacious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, like, um, yeah, the way I did vocab was, just, like, again, like, writing, like, flashcards, because that's just how my
Mhm.
brother was preparing for it, so I was like, "It seems like a good approach." Like, I'd write, like, obviously the word, and then I'd, like, write a sentence associated with it, and,
Mhm.
like, frequently, I would like, when I was, like, speaking with my family, like, I would try to, like, use some of these words in, like, the sentences I was saying. My brother does this a lot better than me because I just did not really care that much, but I think that's probably, like, good practice if you have more time, like, just start, like, using these words and you'll, like, sound like a, I don't know, maybe you won't sound like a nice guy. You might sound a little bit condescending, but I don't know, like good practice. My brother does it. I don't, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect setting to do it because not only do you have to learn it on the flashcard, you have to understand the meaning, use it in a
Yeah,
sentence, then you apply it, and your family's gonna be like, I don't know what that word means. And then you have to
yeah,
try and explain it to them. I think that's a really good strategy to lock it
yeah.
in. But it seems
Mhm.
like it went all out. Your family's like, we don't really care.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to go back to kind of how you talked about sort of like fighting your own ego or just like sort of letting the
Mhm.
ego go. So I guess
Yeah.
coming from like a very strong finance background, going into the quant section, what was some strategies you used to sort of help separate your ego to help you sort of elevate your studying or elevate your test taking?
Yeah, so I think a few like misconceptions I had was that like my fundamentals were like fully good. And like if I didn't finish like a test, then it wasn't because that like I was a bad test taker. It was simply because, like, I was distracted or, like, you know, it's, like,
Hmm.
bad part of the day, you know, like, I ate too much for lunch or something stupid like that.
Hmm.
Um, as far as, like, kinda, like, separating myself from my ego, like, once someone told me to do it, I realized that perhaps, like, I'm being, like, a little like, really, yeah, dumb in, like, how I'm approaching this test, and, like, the person who did it was Greg, like,
Hmm.
I think in his strategy video for, like, quant, it was like, that's, like, one of the key, things when approaching, like, test taking. So, like, yeah, I kinda adopted that mindset, like and this kinda goes into the diagnostic part of, like, your test taking. Like, when you
Hmm.
get things wrong, like, to an extent, like, it could be silly mistakes, but, like, generally, you really want to understand the roots of, like, why you're making the mistakes you're making. Is it because you're just bad at reading? And to an extent, like, that's kinda me, where, like, some of the times, like, for some of, like, the, like, geometry questions, like, honestly, geometry was the hardest for me. It's been a while since I studied geometry. I think I studied that in,
Yeah.
like, high school. Um, but yeah, like, a lot of the times, like, I was just visualizing the wrong question, and
Mm.
that was, like, kind of a mistake for me. Um, for some of the parts, like, again, like, probability, like, that's something I'm, like, more or less strong at, but, like, kinda differentiating, like, between, like, you know, combination, permutation problems, trying to understand, like, all the ways, like, a question could be asked. Like, that was, like, one of the fundamentals that I was lacking for, like, probability specifically. So for me, in order to address that, like, I spent a lot of time like with the target test prep material, just like reading through, doing all the questions on target test prep. Um, yeah, okay. Like some of the like the quant mountain is really helpful because like there are just some like very basic like I guess like shortcuts that you can take during the test that really help you like optimize your test taking.
Mm.
For example, like number of like integers in an interval, number of multiples in an interval. There's not something that like I would have like deliberately studied beforehand, but like yeah, like understanding some of the shortcuts, like once you've kind of got the fundamentals down, it'll really help you like optimize your time actually test taking.
Yeah. No, I think I think you hit on a fantastic point, which is the strategies provided for those specific topics are, I
Mhm.
think, probably the most powerful, not only for yourself to sort of frame all those questions, but then to also be able to implement those shortcuts and be like, all right, here's kind of the step by step of how I should approach
Mhm.
a permutation problem or a combination problem, or this specific probability set. And I think going through like a TTP or any other resource, just reading through their like overall breakdown of the section and then like their strategy or any shortcuts to
Mhm.
calculate is always super helpful because like in my mind I'm like, okay, I know how to just like hard math code through and get the answer
Yeah,
for this. But then using that shortcut, it cuts out easily like a minute or a minute and a half of work that it would have
exactly.
to do otherwise.
Yeah. Mhm.
Uh, and I guess on that topic, sort of taking mock tests. So besides going in for the Thanksgiving test, which you thought was going to be the
Mhm.
final, turned into diagnostic,
Yeah.
did you take mocks outside of your official test? And what was sort of the timing or strategy behind those?
Yeah, I mean, so as I mentioned, like anyone who's familiar with Greg Matt, there's there's a lot of practice tests, like segmented by like quant and verbal. For me, most of my time was again like spent on the quant just because of like what I was optimizing for like in the test. And I mentioned that there was like the mediums and hards. Generally, I think like the easy questions, like they're not even worth doing. Well, maybe they are. Like for me, they weren't like necessarily worth doing just because like I was like I think I took like one or two and I got like consistently 15s. And like I think generally like the medium questions are pretty reflective of the test. But then the hard questions are more like reflective of like how you'll feel on the test, where like you'll kind of like be like this makes no sense.
Yeah.
But like that's just kind of like a mental hurdle you're gonna have to like overcome. Like
Yeah.
having like the panic of like this just doesn't make any sense and I don't understand what this question is asking. Like consistently putting yourself in like that kind of situation for the quant and the verbal, I'm sure. But like for me it was like mostly quant. Like that's definitely a really valuable like mindset to adopt. Like I think Greg Matt has like 3 practice tests. Those are not way harder, but those are definitely harder than the actual like GRE. I think I bought like my brother bought like the official like books. I forget what it's called, but like on the official books, there's like 3 mock tests. I think anything that ETS provides, on Reddit, a lot of people say that the test has gone a lot harder. I don't
Mhm.
think that's the case. I think for like they might have just gotten unlucky, and like I think
Mhm.
luck is a big factor of this test, which I could like talk a little bit like later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for me, like the quant section, I mostly prepared mediums and hards, and then I took the for Greg Matt, like my scores approximately were like 165, and then
Mhm.
like to be honest, again, because I wasn't optimizing for verbal, I did not even take the verbal sections for mock tests because I just didn't really care.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but I think Greg Matt's like verbal is probably more reflective of the test. So like I think that'll give you a good sense of like where you are in your preparation if you guys are like, yeah, actually working on that.
Yeah. And I think you touched on a good point, which is the mental hurdle of it all. You take the easy, you're like, I got this. You take the medium, you're like, okay, I see I have shaky fundamentals in these topics, and then you take the hard, and that's kind of the stress you kind of feel on test day. You're like,
Mhm.
oh man, I don't even know simple probability right now. I'm just like
Yeah.
so in my head. Was there sort of specific strategies? I know like sort of separating ego was one of them, taking a lot of mocks, refreshing your mind a lot about strategies to tackle problems. Was there
Mhm.
other things or sort of maybe something mentally you sort of told yourself to sort of get through those mental hurdles?
Yeah. So I mean like the time limit is like pretty important.
Yeah.
Like I think understanding that this time limit is not a suggestion, but like generally it's like it is what it is, like that's the amount of time you're allotted during the test. I think like approximately like a minute 45 seconds per question. Yeah, I think like I think when you're beginning to prepare, like the time limit like is less important because like your fundamentals are weak. But like once like 2 weeks before, like maybe a week to 2 weeks before your test, depending on like what your timeline is, like this time limit, like you should really like understand the time limit and like how much time you're allotted per question. And like if you feel that you're like spending too much time on a question, like skip it.
Yeah.
Um I think like once you develop your own strategy, like based on like what like people will tell you, like based on like all the strategy videos out there, like being consistent in how you implement strategy is like
Mhm.
super important because like if you're consistent in your practice, like when you're actually in the test, like that's gonna be the strategy you're gonna rely on. Like if you don't
Yeah.
have a good strategy, if you don't have like a well practiced strategy before you go into the test, you're gonna spend a lot of time fumbling around like on the test, which is like the biggest time waster like you could ever do. So I think like one of the biggest points that like kind of helped me take the actual test was like just again like practice, 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 but not just like practice problems, but practice strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that being consistent in the framework will help a lot when you come to test day, because you'll see the problem and you're like, I may not know the answer right away, but I know the framework for these problems. I'll
Yeah,
just work through
exactly.
that framework. And then you get to a minute and a half and you're like, oh, I already have the answer. Okay, I
Yeah.
can go to the next one. Or you don't. And you're like, all right, I guess I don't know this one. You go to the next. And it's just like, just being in your head and you're like, I know I approach each problem. Here's how it goes. You get to a minute and
Hmm.
a half, you're like, can I get it in the next 15 seconds, or do I just go to the next one and I'll come back if I have time?
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess I would love to sort of end off on kind of any advice you have for others who are prepping for the GRE, and potentially any other secrets you may have besides just sort of
Yeah.
downloading the vocabulary into your brain.
Yeah. I think one thing that's important, um, from my perspective, is like the time you kind of like perceive that you need to actually prepare for the test.
Mhm.
For people like, cause like for MBAs, I know like a lot of you guys are like have been out of school for a while. But like, if you just think back of like when you were in school, like you generally didn't have like months to prepare for like one test. And I think like one fallacy that like you might have is that like the more time like you give yourself to take the test, the more prepared you're gonna be. But like one thing that like I kind of realized is like if you don't give yourself like a timeline, like a very strict timeline, you're gonna like often like for me, like maybe you guys are more disciplined, but like for me, like it's very easy to put things off and to like believe that you have a lot of time to like put information in your brain. But the reality is that that's just like kind of hard and just like in practice it's not very implementable. So like if you're able to kind of like give yourself like a strict deadline, like a month, 2 months max, like just to like get a diagnostic of where you're actually at, that'll like encourage me to like be efficient in how I study, like rather than like like go through like 10 different like resource materials and like practice things that aren't actually important. It really like forced me to streamline my preparation, which is like important for like test taking, and I'm sure it's like important for life in general. um yeah, I think that was the most important. um yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point to kind of end it off on, using framework and strategy to your advantage, being disciplined in your approach, and just going in there with a plan not only helps you
Mhm.
with the prep, but then the actual execution at the test day. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you very much, Jeddy, for coming on. Is if there's any message you'd like to end off on, go ahead, and I think we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah, I mean, just like good luck with your preparation. Don't be too worried. I think, oh, one thing like I wanted to say was like on Reddit, there's like a lot of people who have like these really crazy success stories, where they're like, I had 2 weeks to prepare for the test, but I didn't study and I got a 340. Like, don't like get in. Like, who cares about that? Like I spent probably like 8 hours. Oh, another tip I had was um like the time blocks I had were like a lot of the times they were like in sequence, but like one thing I tried to put into practice was like taking practice tests throughout the day. So like when your mind is like kind of fatigued at night, like if you can still execute when your mind is fatigued, that kind of like it's just good, like because on the test day, like you might not be like peak performance, but like if you can still like have like a baseline when you're like not on peak performance, yeah, like that's just like good like baseline to have. But like again, like going back to like a lot of the Reddit stories out there, like don't get discouraged by these people. Like just do your best. Like there's a lot of information, but like if you just approach things systematically and like sequentially, like it'll work out. It's just like any test that you'll ever take like in life. Although I'm sure like you guys haven't taken tests in a while, but yeah, like
Yeah.
just think back to your undergrad days. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no stress. The only comparison you should have to yourself, the best
Yeah.
you can do out there is all that really matters. So as long as you're improving, that's really what you need to focus on.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. That's much better than what I said.
No, I think you did a great job. I just like bringing it all back together. Once again,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Jetty.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for coming to our GRE Success Talks, and we'll have more for you coming soon. Thank you once again, Jetty.
All right.